are the people in your neighborhood, in your neighborhood, in your neighborhood. Say, who are...
Your Mortgage Guy Brian here with episode 4 of These Are the People in Your Neighborhood. Today in the studio, I have Aby Fewel from My 3 Meals. She's a dietitian registered in Illinois and Wisconsin, and she is here to provide us with some really great information, not just about her business, but about the dietitian world in general. So, Aby, thanks so much for coming on in.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Brian.
Wonderful. All right. So I think the easiest place to start with this, because my understanding of what a dietitian is, what it means to go on a diet, I probably should go on one, is pretty...
I would argue you should not.
Okay. See, I didn't even know that, right? So let's just start about you, right? Yeah. How long have you been a registered dietitian? And what did you do beforehand that kind of led you into this?
Yeah, so I've been a dietitian for 10 years. I've worked in every type of setting you can imagine, hospitals, all different types of units, dialysis, nursing homes, consulting, kind of all over the place. And what I really felt like was missing when I was a dietitian working in those clinical settings was like you get to spend like 5, maybe if you're lucky, 10 minutes with a patient. And you just don't really get to talk a lot about like their life and how eating is going to like actually work for them. I can go into a room when you're sitting in your hospital bed and say like, eat less salt. But like, what does that actually look like? What foods do you actually like? So I started my practice so I could kind of like dig a little deeper and have those conversations to like see how people can actually fit the things they like, things that are going to nourish them and help them meet their health goals, how they can like apply that to their everyday life.
So to back it up even further, not even about what a dietitian does, but when you were younger, like, was this the field you wanted to get into? Was it like, little kids are like, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be president.
Yeah.
Aby, you were like, I want to help people eat smart. Is it smarter? Would that be the way to say it?
Just maybe more with a little more intention. Maybe.
Okay.
As a kid, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I had no clue what I wanted to do in college, even famously undecided for 3 years of college.
I'm sure your parents were really happy about that.
Yes. And when I was 8, I actually just kind of told my parents that I wanted to be a vegetarian. And I think I just remember like looking at my dog and being like, oh, shoot. Like, I'm eating animals, like, ugh. And then, so my parents are really cool. My dad is a recovering hippie and my mother is a librarian. And so they were like, okay, figure it out. Like, go to the library, read about it, be healthful while you're doing this. So as a kid, I would just sit at the library and just pore over books about nutrition. And I never even realized that that was a career. So angry when in the 3rd year of my college, being undecided, I took a nutrition class on a whim and I was like, how come no advisor or no person like told me dietitians existed? I like love reading about nutrition and it was just sort of like an aha moment.
So, obviously, like you said, no high school classes like, and here is what the food pyramid is or anything like that. So, you said vegetarian.
Yeah.
Myth? Yeah. Truth? Is it good to be... People tell me it's not good to be a vegetarian. People tell me, like, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, but, like, are there benefits to eating meat? Is it a bad thing to be a vegetarian, a vegan? Like, is there too far?
So with any sort of decision that you make, we're all going to make some sort of decision based on like ethical reasons, environmental reasons, preference reasons, whatever you're just excited about. For my money, it's all fine as long as you're thinking about like, okay, if I'm cutting out this one thing because of whatever reason I'm excited about, am I getting the nutrition from somewhere else? So for me, nutrition is all about adding. Never about subtraction. So for me, it's like I want to add in more nutrient-dense foods. I want to add in plants because I like the way they make me feel. But I also feel like there's room for all foods. So if you're someone that's excited about being a vegetarian or not being a vegetarian, maybe you just like want to eat a lot of meat, and that's cool too. But then just working with a dietitian to figure out how you can make sure you're getting that like wide range of nutrition, no matter how you decide you want to eat that way.
Okay. So you kind of alluded to this at the very beginning, but I want to understand what makes your practice, My Three Meals, what makes that different than the dietitian that's at your local hospital, that's in, I think you mentioned like an assisted living facility, places like that? What makes My Three Meals going to be a different alternative?
Yeah, so I'm an anti-diet dietitian and also an intuitive eating counselor. So all the work I do is still medical nutrition therapy, but through the lens of intuitive eating. Have you ever heard of intuitive eating, Brian?
No. I mean, I know there are food groups that are fruits, vegetables, and carbs, and dairy.
Cool.
Dairy. Love dairy.
Love it. I love dairy too. So it's great. Yeah. So an anti-dietitian is someone who actively rejects diet culture. So really tries to break people out of that like restrictive mentality, and intuitive eating feeds into that, which is what you normally would not get from like when you go to the hospital and you see a dietitian, or if you're in a facility that has a dietitian, they're typically not digging into like the emotional piece about food. And that really comes from training and digging into like all of the principles of intuitive eating, starting with like honoring your hunger and getting in touch with what your hunger and fullness are doing, figuring out what you're actually hungry for, and building sort of your nutrition from that standpoint.
So when you talk about like what is your hunger saying, like is that the whole idea of I should eat till I feel full, or what is, am I on the right track where?
Yeah, it's a lot of different things. Hunger is very elusive. I always say that hunger is like kind of like a bratty teen, because sometimes it's very vocal and very in your face, and sometimes it's like, I'm not going to talk to you at all. So we know that our car needs gas no matter what our gas gauge says. If our gas gauge is broken, we still have to use gas to go. So sometimes, like for example, people may wake up and they're not experiencing hunger in the mornings. Maybe they've just blow past breakfast usually, so they don't like hear hunger, but they still need nourishment. So it's really about kind of connecting them to what are their hunger signals. Sometimes we think of hunger as like stomach growling hunger, but there's also like hunger that starts in your mind a little bit, like thinking about food, checking a menu for a place you're going to go to later. That preoccupation with food is actually usually one of the first signs of hunger. So just kind of getting more in tune with that.
So my wife would say that my hunger sign is, and I'm sure a lot of people experience this, is hangry. Like I skip right past like thinking about food, and I just get mean. And it's like, Brian, the Snickers commercials are like 100% accurate. Like, Brian, go eat something. Yeah. And it's amazing. I feel better, but I don't, my stomach's not growling. I'm not thinking about food. I'm just irritable.
Yeah.
So
it's coming late.
Good. So intuitive eating. Anti-diet dietitian. These are all really good buzzwords. And it's important for people to know, when should they go and reach out to My Three Meals? Like they hear these words, anti-diet dietitian, intuitive eating. How do they know that it's time for them to go and connect with you? Like who's your clients? How are they getting to you? How do they connect?
Yeah. So something you just said, like a great example would be someone like you who says, okay, my only hunger signal is hangry, right? But there's probably a lot of little nuanced things happening that maybe you're just not noticing, or your body's not giving you, because the more we kind of ignore hunger, or we just kind of place it to the side a little bit, the less our body's going to give us hunger, because it costs energy for our body to give us that signal. So if we don't have energy in our tank to draw from, then our body's not going to be giving us that signal. So anybody that has kind of maybe dieted in the past, anybody who doesn't really feel confident in their choices of like what to make for dinner. I'll give you an example. We live in this culture where it's prized to restrict, and it's prized to like be on a diet or to follow a certain whatever kind of regimen you're excited about. But that really disconnects us from what our body needs, because we're listening to like an external force versus our internal hunger, because we're just a little disconnected from it. So trying to get back in touch with that is kind of confusing, because we have these external messages about like what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. And then we have this internal hunger. So no wonder we like open the fridge and we're like, oh, wait, what am I supposed to eat? Because it's just, there's a confusion there. So anyone who expresses that sort of thing, like I never know what to make, or I'm bored of what I'm eating. In sessions, we talk about just that, and we get get you reacquainted with your preferences, things that are accessible to you, meaning like, what do you have the energy to prepare after work? And then we kind of build your meal plan together. So a lot of different people can benefit from that. But my bread and butter, I would say, would be people who have tried lots of dieting in the past and are just not happy with kind of being on a diet anymore, and they want an alternative.
That was going to be my next question is, I'm somebody who has tried dieting lots of times, been told it only works with lifestyle changes, right? I have to exercise. I have to be doing other things in my life, getting lots of sleep, etc. What do you say to that person who's like, I've tried this? Like, I know you say you're the anti-diet dietitian, but it's still about food. Yeah. So what do you say to somebody who is like, I've tried it, I don't think it's going to work? Yeah.
You're not alone. So there's a lot of research to kind of back up not dieting, because dieting is actually really, your body experiences it as it would experience a period of famine. Your body kind of adjusts and becomes better at storing when it senses any type of scarcity. So really what that says to me is that, like, what if we just nourished and we made sure there weren't like huge gaps in the day where we were skipping meals, and making sure that those meals are satisfying to you and nourishing, so that way you're not coming home in a fog, hangry, and in trouble with your wife.
That would be helpful. What about, and this is just coming to my brain right now, what about like all of the changes that are happening? You know, if you go back 15, 20 years ago, celiac disease was, I feel like when I was a kid, nobody talked about celiac disease. How has that changed your practice, your prescriptions? Like, how has that changed you as a dietitian?
Yeah, so there's actually it's pretty a small slice of the population that actually needs to restrict gluten for celiacs, and happy to work with those folks. And to really, again, the key is, if you have to cut something out for some reason, maybe shining a light more on the things you can have and focusing on how we can get you nourished, knowing that there's going to be a gap in what you're able to eat. So I love to work with folks like that. But a lot of the gluten-free stuff, the majority of it is like kind of buzzy, fatty stuff.
So there are less people that are actually like allergic to gluten than you would actually like that. I feel like 5 out of 10 people say like, oh, sorry, gluten intolerant.
The gluten-free people have a great marketing team.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think of. What about like lactose intolerant? Is that as prevalent as you would think?
I mean, there's a lot of people that are lactose intolerant. It's more common in some other cultures. Historically, Americans, it's pretty low. As we age, sometimes our lactose intolerance does increase, but sometimes you can actually introduce small amounts of lactose-containing items and kind of reverse a little bit of that to a certain extent. But again, if you are lactose intolerant, or if you just like don't like milk or the milk industry, working with a dietitian to say like, hey, I'm not eating dairy, but I know I still need the nutrients from that. And one of my pet peeves, I would say, are people who say like, oh, I don't drink milk, but I drink almond milk. Cool, fine, expensive water.
I've never heard it referred to as expensive water. So it has none of the same nutritional value that milk does?
It's just not really comparable at all. So almond milk has like 2 grams of protein-ish. Cow's milk would have closer to like 8. Probably not a lot of calcium. It's not usually fortified with vitamin D. So it really, in my mind, it's like almond milk is great if you can afford to buy expensive water, fine. But really finding a place to how are we going to replace that milk missing from your diet? If you decide not to eat it, great. But don't think you should replace it with something that's like not comparable nutritional.
So real fast then, what, for those people who are cutting out that and saying like, hey, instead of, fat-free milk, 2% milk, whole milk in my coffee, I've been putting almond milk because I think it's a good substitute. What should they be going to instead to still get that milk nutritional product?
I would say if they're putting in their coffee, probably like not a big deal, because they're probably only using, depending on how much they use, maybe they are using a lot. I'm a soy milk girly because it is pretty comparable. But just looking at kind of like what you're eating most days otherwise, and then seeing like maybe you need a calcium supplement. Or maybe there are some other things like soy stuff fortified with vitamin D and C. But like most likely, I would probably recommend a supplement at that point, because a lot of people, we get a lot of those nutrients from like greens, and a lot of people don't eat a ton of those heavy, rich calcium greens, but some people do. So then those folks, I would be like, okay, that's chill. But maybe they don't like cow's milk, but maybe they do like yogurt, or maybe they do like cottage cheese. Cottage cheese.
I mean, anybody who knows me who watches this will now, they'll be like, and you've just hit Brian's like
cottage cheese
guilty pleasure on the head.
Okay.
I think at one point my mom told me that when I was in high school, she was like, Brian, and this is so not a good thing to say. Like, I don't even know if I should say it. She was like, Brian, there are a lot of other habits that are not like, you should pick up smoking cigarettes multiple packs a day, because you would be spending
cottage cheese?
Well, it's the amount of money that I was spending on cottage cheese. She was like, you spend more money on cottage cheese, like a terrible habit like smoking cigarettes would be cheaper for you.
Sure. Okay. Well, I want to talk about that because I heard that word guilty. So like a guilty pleasure. Are you stealing this cottage cheese, Brian?
From the rest of my family, if that's a way to like steal it. No, I'm not like stealing it from the store, but like,
are you harming anyone? Like
my family from having to be around cottage cheese so much?
I think it's interesting, like in the like anti-diet vein, that word like guilt, we love to attach like a morality to food, right? Like, but really it's like, I didn't like kill anybody for this cottage cheese. Like, why am I calling it a sin, or why am I calling it a guilty? Because we're kind of taught from diet culture that like certain foods have a moral high, they're higher valued, right? And then other foods are like morally like bad and wrong. The tricky thing there, and this is what I talk about with clients, is that when we judge those foods like that, boy, oh boy, we open that door to judging ourselves, you know?
So there is a component almost of like a therapeutic component to nutrition, and is healthy eating the right way to say it? Like that's a judgment, I guess. So like what's the term that you're trying to get onto people, or the ideal or idea that you're trying to have people walk away from it?
Yeah, I usually ask people in the first session, what does health mean to you? Like, what is your version of health? And for a lot of people, they've never been asked that question by a doctor or by a practitioner. So a lot of people say, I want to be able to like do the things I like to do as I age. That's health. And so then in sessions, I can look back at that little note and I can say like, okay, Brian, if you eat cottage cheese every day, are you still going to be able to like do the things you want to do? Because that's your definition of health. Are you still going to be able to like pick your daughter up? Are you still going to be able to do that? And I would argue, yes, you could. And it does fit. So a lot of foods do fit, and we like to think they aren't healthy. But then when we look at what our health goals actually are, usually there's like room for a lot of different things.
So I like that. I think it's really important to take the judgment out of eating, because I think you've alluded to this multiple times throughout the conversation, is there is stigma that is associated in eating in our culture, and you're really trying to break people from that stigma.
Yeah.
So not that they're eating the right or wrong foods, or the good or the bad foods. They're eating the foods for them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe they do have some sort of health concern. Like maybe they were told by their doctor, hey, you need to eat less salt because you have hypertension. Sweet. Let's shine the light more on foods that you like that are maybe naturally lower in salt, versus just giving you a handout that says, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat this, right? Because no one likes that, and that sucks.
So do you work with someone's like general practitioner to come up with, I guess we haven't even talked about this. Do you come up with a meal plan? Is that like the end goal of your sessions? Is it like, here is how to achieve health in your mind? Here is what you should be thinking about.
Yeah. So typically what I do first is kind of work on like repairing that relationship to food and assessing what is the relationship to food, because it's really hard to deliver nutrition principles when someone has kind of in the back of their mind this like disconnect from their hunger or fullness, how they cope with their emotions, all of those things. So really it's a process of working through that. And then through that conversation, we're working on what do you like for breakfast? And we're kind of building a meal plan together. So we're saying, okay, these are the foods that you really like to have for breakfast. Here are all of the options that you normally like to draw from for breakfast. Can we beef them up somehow by making sure they're well-rounded? And then here are the things you really like as snacks. What's kind of just playing around in that space. And then we're sending kind of we're making that plan like together throughout weeks of working together.
So a typical session, run me through, you kind of talked about it a little bit. Give me like a beginning session, someone who's been in the program with you, working with you for a couple months. Yeah. And then, is this something that is, once you're with Aby and working with My Three Meals, are you working with them for the rest of your life? Or is there kind of like an on-ramp and then an off-ramp to say like, congrats, you're eating healthy in your mind?
Yeah, everybody's just like moving in with me. I have a big room where we all kind of hang out. Usually the first session is we just get to know one another and kind of your food history and your relationship to food, dislikes, likes, that kind of stuff. And identifying what those health goals are for you. Or maybe like you were talking about before, communicating with your physician. A lot of times like a physician will contact me and say, hey, I have this patient, they have this going on, these are their diagnoses. I want them to see a dietitian for X. And then usually I'll like kind of send my notes to them and say, here's the progress, here's the goals we've set. And usually in session, we'll kind of go over everything you ate yesterday. So I'll ask, hey, what time did you wake up yesterday? When was the first thing that you ate yesterday? And then go through their day through that schedule. And then we find those opportunities together. And usually we set like a small goal in the first few sessions weekly. And usually the goal is like super low stakes. Like next Tuesday, Brian, you're going to eat a whole grain at breakfast. Here are the like 5 whole grains we've talked about that you really like. So how can you fit those into breakfast? Next week, we're going to say, how did the whole grains go, Brian? And you're going to be like, I hated it. And then I'm going to say, okay, cool. What can we try? What else can we try? And then usually after about 5-6 weeks of doing kind of that active goal setting, we have a whole list of goals that you're now just doing habitually that just sort of make sense for you. And then from there, it depends on how much attention you need. Sometimes that means once a month we're meeting for just like a check-in. Sometimes that means, hey, I want to keep talking to you every week or every other week because I'm still struggling with my hydration goal or whatever it is. So yeah. And then usually as people fade out, we'll do like an annual checkup or twice a year checkup. It just depends on the person.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring it to the economy right now, and this may or may not be your area of expertise beyond nutrition.
I know everything.
But you're like, and here is what the Fed should be doing. So right now, inflation. People are talking about groceries are expensive.
Yeah.
Fact or fiction, healthy or nutritional eating is expensive. And that's why I have to go to the dollar menu. That's why I can't buy fresh fruits and vegetables. How do you respond to that when someone gives you that as their, I don't want to say excuse, but as their rationale for why they eat the way they eat?
Yeah, and a lot of times that's tough. That is a tough conversation for a lot of people. And unfortunately, there's not always like a one-size-fit-all answer to that question. It just kind of depends on your situation. But a lot of times, people that are maybe have a history of dieting, or just like a lot of people in general, they tend to like stack things. And what I mean by that is we blow past breakfast, we blow past lunch, and we end up eating a little bit more later on in the day. And maybe that's more than what we would have eaten the whole day. And I would argue that money is the same for like spending money on food. So a lot of times the like quote unquote healthful foods aren't necessarily going to be the most expensive foods. And I believe that you can really nourish with any food that's accessible to you, just kind of planning it out in a way that's a little more going to be like fitting in your budget a little bit more. And a lot of times working with a dietitian can actually help you reduce food waste and give you more ideas, because a lot of people like kind of lean on takeout because they just don't know what to eat. They don't have a choice.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Like, so what you're saying is, and I've heard this before, if you can get into kind of more of a it sounds like it's about like behavioral change as well, like changing your behavior. So can I get in the habit of cooking my own food, preparing my own meals, and not relying on the fast food, etc.
Yeah.
What about meal prep services like Blue Apron and those types of things? We're not sponsored by anybody, but like, are those better alternatives to restaurants, fast food, carry out, things like that?
I think it just depends on what's accessible to you and what your health goals are. It's going to be different for everybody. If you're someone who is like, I don't know what to make, I don't know how to cook, maybe getting that little box that has the little kit can be something you can try for a few weeks that can then jog your mind to say like, oh, I can make this thing. And oh, now this is in my wheelhouse. It's more about like anything that's going to expose you to stuff like that is going to be cool, because then now you know, oh, wait, they sent me this like kit with all this stuff to make chicken tacos, but I can just buy all that stuff and now I know how to make it. And maybe it's more of like that accessibility in terms of like you're not as comfortable around those certain things. So trying those things out can get you there a little faster. I
think my biggest issue is I know how to make like I've talked about this before. I know how to make like what is it called? The it's a chicken dish. I don't remember the name of it.
Casserole?
Ina Garten taught me how to do it through YouTube. Like I'm
Brian's
good at that.
Chicken Special?
Sure, we'll call it that. My mother-in-law loves it. I know how to make Chrissy Teigen's spicy miso pasta. Like I've got my like 4 or 5 dishes.
Yeah.
I'm really good at those, but I'm a little nervous. I'm hesitant to step outside of my wheelhouse and try these different like cuts of meat I've never cooked before, vegetables I've never had before that like I see people eating and it's like I'm not a big vegetable fan. So like what is that part of the session, is trying to make people feel more comfortable with even preparing food?
Yeah, so a lot of times what I like to do is get people to try those foods kind of as a convenience source. So usually we'll talk about what those foods are that they're excited about, and then we'll find those foods maybe pre-prepared from somewhere else. Like maybe Whole Foods has like the thing you're talking about as like a pre-made meal already. First, just trying that, right? And then talking about the components. I'm not a chef. I can send you to a great chef I know who does cooking classes and things like that. But a lot of it's just talking about kind of finding foods that you're going to maybe be a little challenged. So I might challenge you a little bit and say like, hey, next week I want you to try a food you've not tried before. I have a lot of tools to kind of like break people out of those boxes that they find themselves in, and just kind of set those as mini goals to kind of get more comfortable with different things. Yeah.
Kraft macaroni and cheese. Speaking of boxes, like that's my...
Great.
I'm stuck in that box.
Love it.
SpaghettiOs. Like
I'm here for
anything
it.
from the aisles in the middle. I'm really good at making those things.
I'm here for it.
So you've talked about this a few times, and I think you have kind of made it clear that this is important. And correct me if I'm wrong, breakfast. Like how important really, because that's, since I was a little kid, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. How important is breakfast in reality?
I love brekkie. Brekkie's so good. It's my favorite meal of the day.
Do you watch Bluey by any chance? Because that's
is
what
that like a dog or?
That's Well, when you have children and little kids, you'll watch Bluey all the time, and they call it brekkie too. So I thought that made me like, oh my God, she's a Bluey fan.
I didn't take it from Bluey. I took it from somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Or maybe I did take it from Bluey. I think that all meals can be kind of worked in a way that's going to work for you. And the deal with breakfast is that we've gone a long time without eating when we wake up. Maybe if we had dinner at 5 o'clock and now we wake up, it's like 8 o'clock. That's more than 12 hours. It's a long time to go without eating. And we're asking our bodies to do a lot of things when we first wake up, and then we go to work, and then maybe it'll be a few hours before we get to lunch. So think about like all of that time. And basically what's happening here is we have certain brain chemistry, right? It's called neuropeptide Y. It's a brain chemical that's kind of like ramping up and making us crave carbohydrate. Your body has all of these biological, fun, juicy things happening to get you nourished and to help you survive. So you have this brain chemical ramping up as you sleep. It's increasing your drive to get energy, carbohydrates, and it's decreasing that full sense of fullness. So you have this chemical that's like building up, Maybe you skip through breakfast because you're not hungry, even though you probably are, you're just not hearing it. And then maybe you wait a little bit, and then lunch is maybe like a salad or like something kind of like light because that was what was available to you, and maybe you're kind of limiting carbs or whatever. And then now it's dinner time, and now this neuropeptide Y is like raging in your brain, and it is like, we need food. And so what happens is then you sit down to dinner and you eat past fullness. Or you just kind of like eat until you're uncomfortably full. You know, it's so common.
That's me.
It's so common. That's human. Some people with human bodies, Brian. It's not you. It's the human race. So the cool thing about knowing about that is that we love to pinpoint it on willpower. We love to say, like, I have no willpower. I can't stop myself. That is not true. It has nothing to do with willpower and everything to do with your brain chemistry and your body's drive to survive what it is thinking is a famine. So breakfast allows you to like stop that kind of from happening right in the morning, and it gets you that good energy. So that way throughout the day, you're not then like eating past fullness because you don't have that kind of process cycle happening.
Okay, so there are two questions that immediately came to my head, and people are getting like the in-depth insight into Brian's eating habits. And like, obviously all these questions are not just coming from nowhere. They're, spoiler alert, this is my eating habits.
Yeah.
And well, this first one, not me. Intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Is that like, you kind of just said, like, you have dinner at 5 and then don't eat until, you don't eat until 8:30. Is that actually a beneficial way? Like, is there a point in the night where you should stop eating?
So I heard two questions. Intermittent fasting, I'll take that one first. So being an anti-diet dietitian, my initial reaction is always going to be like, no, boo, don't, right? And the reason being is because our body does experience dieting as it experiences a period of famine or scarcity. And that's actually been shown to lower our metabolism. It makes our body more efficient at storage. So pretty counterintuitive if you're like, I'm going to lose weight. So second part was
Is there a point in the night where I should I will have a bowl of cereal at 10:30 at night?
Okay, yeah. That's a total diet culture rule of like, don't eat past 8, right? So again, listening to hunger assures us and assures our body that we're a reliable nourisher. And when we're a reliable nourisher, that's where our metabolism likes to be. So if you're hungry at midnight, if you're hungry when you're hungry, that's when it's like appropriate to eat. Also, when you're not hungry, if you're just like excited about cereal and you think like, oh, this is what I really want right now, and there's a lot to be said about honoring those things within what is accessible to you and knowing that food's going to be there when you need it. Because sometimes we do just like want cereal, and that's appropriate too.
There are lots of times where I just want cereal, specifically Lucky Charms. And I mean, I eat like a 5-year-old essentially is what I
love it.
This has been a session of food for me. Like,
Great.
I feel like I'm learning so much about my eating habits and what is healthy for me. And I'm going to go home to my wife and let her know that it is okay to eat what I feel and all of those types of things.
Tell her all food nourishes.
Good. So we're coming to the end of our time together. And again, this is just the first of hopefully many conversations that we have together, just so you can make people feel more aware of eating and food and what it means to work with a dietitian. So I really enjoyed having you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
This is the part where I want you to tell people if there was a part of this program where they were like, you know what, I got to talk to Aby real fast. Give me, how does somebody get in touch with Aby? And I think specifically for your field versus some of my other guests, like a realtor or a homeowner insurance or a divorce attorney, is there some things they need to consider first before working with you, specifically like insurance? So how do they get in touch with you, and what do they need to know before they start working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to my website, my3meals.com, 3 the number or 3 the word, your pick, dealer's choice. And you can book right on there. It says see a dietitian, and that kind of gives you everything you need to know. You can see my calendar on there and book yourself an appointment. I do accept insurance. So Blue Cross PPO plans usually include unlimited visits visits with me, which is so awesome. And otherwise, I can give you what's called a super bill. So if I'm not in network with your provider, I can usually give you what's that super bill that then you can turn into your insurance for possible reimbursement, and I can walk you through all of that. But on my website, you can go to contact me if you have questions about the insurance stuff, and we can walk through it together.
Is there ways that our listeners can follow you? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram? Are you on TikTok? Where are they connecting with you and learning more about your business and about the world of dietitian?
Yeah. I am nowhere, Brian, but they can call me. Just call me.
Give me the number. Let's hear it.
Yeah, it's 234-219-1510.
Perfect.
So
All right.
call me, text me. That's where I'm at.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming into the studio today. We really loved having you.
Thanks.
This was probably the most informative conversation that I've had. I learned a lot of new things, and I'm walking away with a whole new understanding of food and what is healthy eating to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's important, and thank you so much for coming.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Again, this is your mortgage guy, Brian. We're here with These Are the People in Your Neighborhood. If you liked what you heard, make sure to click like, subscribe. You can find this on SoundCloud. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on our website, yourmortgageguybrian.com. Follow us on Instagram at yourmgbrian. Thanks so much for coming. And again, Aby, loved having you.
Who are the people in your neighborhood? In your neighborhood, in your neighborhood, say